y'all. We're on day 3. I think we made it. I think we're consistent. Love that for us. Today we're going to be talking about letters of recommendation. More specifically, I want to walk you through my process for picking recommenders for my applications. So, as many of you who have already looked at your application portals know, you're allowed probably a minimum of 3 recommenders, but have a maximum of up to 5 recommenders. I ended up asking 4 people for recommendation letters. I also knew at certain points with applications that only had 3 spots, I would have to be like, okay, you apply versus you versus you. So I was strategic about thinking which different recommenders pair well together with others and which ones speak to different aspects of my work. So my first recommender was actually an advisor I had for the TROP business program that I was in at UChicago. We met in an elevator randomly, and after that found out he was my advisor for the business program, and then ended up staying a mentor and friend in my life, and we're still very close to this day. The second recommender I had was a professor through my environmental studies major. I had taken 2 classes with her, and her and I were just very cool. Like, I really enjoy her. She's just great vibe. But part of the reason I was interested in having her talk about my experience was because she saw me as a student and she saw how it grew. Because I took a class with her my 2nd year, and then I took a class with her my 4th year. And I was just a better student. I had grown so much, and she could see that academically and also, just personally. My third application recommender was a different professor I had for undergrad, also within the environmental studies major. There was only like 15 kids in the major, so all the professors knew us really well. They were like, oh yeah, there's Jada. And I took 2 courses with him, kind of in the same cadence, but these are focused on the policy side, and I wanted someone to be able to speak to that, whereas the other professor spoke more to like the environmental justice side of me, and I wanted someone with the applicable policy, real-world experience who could speak to that narrative more so. My 4th recommender was actually from an internship I completed during undergrad with ABC News. I had my letter of recommendation from a chief anchor, and I was able to get published through ABC News, so that's very rare to do, and I knew she was impressed with everything I had done up until that point. And I wanted to make sure like that through line of like accomplishment was highlighted in my work. So the other thing I want to point out is the different aspects of yourself that you're trying to elevate with your letters of recommendation. So first, you have to make sure these people actually like you, or you're memorable to them in a positive way. Because the last thing you want is someone to say like, oh yeah, Josh is cool, take him or leave him, like, it's been good. That's the last thing you want. The second element I want you to think about when choosing your recommenders is, who do you know? I was strategically trying to think about who has ties to the universities I'm most interested in. Who has ties to UC Berkeley, who has spoken there, who like knows professors there already, who has done a fellowship there, whatever. Who has done it at UC Berkeley, who has done it at Harvard, who has done it at NYU, or who is connected to any of these players in some capacity at these different schools. Because I wanted to showcase like, yes, I can get into those spaces, and yes, I am able to thrive there as well. And the third thing I think you should be trying to highlight is your academic excellence. What I mean by this is you don't want an application reviewer to look at your application and have questions about whether you will thrive here academically. You will struggle with your classes. You will fail out of your classes. Because there's one thing that universities hate, it's their dropout rate, because that impacts their numbers and retention numbers. So they don't want that to go down. You need to have someone who can vouch for your academic excellence, which is why I always advise at least one of your recommenders to be in the academia world and has seen you as a student. So when I was talking about my different recommenders, the first one, I really wanted him to write my letter of rec because he actually knew me as a person and didn't know me as a student, but he also knew I was multifaceted and had different interests because I was an environmental studies major, I worked at startups, I was in the TROP business program, and I hated school. So he just knew me on a very personal level and could speak to like my growth throughout all my years of college because he met me probably within the first 2 months of my undergrad program. The two academic ones speak to my academic rigor, speak to my writing style, speak to my interest in my work because environmental justice has always been a through line in my work, and I tied that back into my urban planning essays that I wrote, and they were able to vouch for my character in an academic sense. My last recommender outlines an accomplishment, right? It's a really big deal to get published at ABC News for an article, so it was very cool to have that highlighted through a recommender and show the committee reviewing my application, hey, like, she talks a good game and also she can back it up with the facts. Your character, your academic excellence, and your accomplishments are all things you need to consider when thinking of your recommenders. How do you approach these people about giving you a letter of rec? For me personally, I already had very close relationships with two of the people, so one of my professors and then the mentor I had for my trial business program. We were still very cool. We had like 2 to 3 month catch-ups every once in a while. And so they knew what journey I was on as it related to like going into urban planning. For the other two, the ABC News person was really hard to get a hold of. She's busy, I get it. And so I actually had to reach out through different people to really ask her to like write it for me. We actually didn't ever hop on the phone or anything. Everything was communicated via email, but hey, she agreed to do it. And I was like, yeah, let me just remind you of what I accomplished when I was there, send that little blurb, and then you can do what you do. And then the other one was a professor who, again, I wasn't super close with, but I think with him, he knew who I was, so it was a lot easier to kind of just ease my way back in and be like, hey, how are you doing? But I did end up having a video call with him to explain like, hey, I'm interested in this program. Would you be willing to write me a letter of rec? And he agreed to it so graciously. So that's how I got all my letters of rec lined up. I reached out to everyone in September and ended up with all of my letters of rec being completed probably by end of November because of the NYU scholarship money that was available, and they had an accelerated timeline, so they were all done by then. It's important to give them enough time to be able to write you a substantial and worthwhile letter of rec. Don't just rush them last minute, y'all. If you have any other questions or comments about letters of recommendation or who your recommender should be, feel free to comment in the section below. And if not, I'll see you tomorrow.